Good morning, everybody. Napoleon was pretty successful in the early years of his rule, but in 1807 he decided to invade Spain, and that was a big mistake, partly because the British fought against the French in Spain with one of their best generals, a guy named Arthur Wellesley, who we would know later as the Duke of Wellington. And it was on this date, April 6 in 1812, that the British won a ferocious battle against the French, right on the border of Spain and Portugal. This map of Europe from 1810 reminds us how dominant Napoleon was in Europe. Now, our event is 3 years prior, in 1807, and if you look carefully in the lower left, you can see where Portugal is. Now, the Portuguese did not cooperate with the continental system. This was Napoleon's economic embargo on Britain, partly because Portugal had a long history of trade with Britain. In 1805, when the British Navy defeated the French and Spanish Navy at Trafalgar, this was a reminder to the world, and especially to the Portuguese, that the French were not invincible. So here's the Iberian Peninsula. Portugal on the left, Spain takes up most of the peninsula, and then France is to the north. So as the French army came into Spain, they tended to come in from the north over the Pyrenees Mountains. In 1808, Napoleon decided to put his brother Joseph on the throne of Spain in Madrid. The Spanish pushed back, the French responded, and this painting by Goya, the 3rd of May, commemorates when French soldiers shot many Spanish civilians, and this happened throughout Spain, this kind of thing. So the Spanish responded with guerrilla warfare, and this clip from a dictionary tells us that the word guerrilla is simply the Spanish word for little war. So this kind of fighting, guerrilla warfare, gets its beginning in our time period. So here's Arthur Wellesley. Later he's known as the Duke of Wellington, and I'll call him that. He was a very capable soldier in the British Army, and he was assigned to go to Portugal to help the Portuguese and the Spanish fight the French. And this map of the Iberian Peninsula tells us where many of the battles were during what's known as the Peninsular War. So when Wellington went to Lisbon, the capital of Portugal, you can see Lisbon at the bottom of this map. One thing he did was set up defensive works to the north of Lisbon because he assumed the French would come in from the north. And these defensive works are still there. Here they are. And it's basically trench warfare. So this is 100 years before World War I, an early version of trench warfare. So here's our event. Badajoz, directly east of Lisbon, is in Spain, but it's right on the Portuguese border, and you can see it in the middle of this map. It had been a fortified town going back to the Middle Ages. And here's a picture of it today. But note, in the background is a river. So on this river was a really big fortress. And it was occupied by about 5,000 French troops. So here's our event, April 6, 1812. The British attacked the fortress with 3 times that number, about 15,000. But have a lot of casualties, some of the most in Wellington's career. So even though they win, it's at a high cost, and it was soon after this that the British establish the Royal Engineers so they can study how to do sieging, how to build bridges better, etc. That's a direct result of this battle. Well, eventually Napoleon is defeated at Waterloo. Here's Wellington, the victor. At Waterloo, Napoleon is banished to the South Atlantic, and Wellington returns to Britain, where he becomes involved in politics. So if you go to Paris and you check out the Arc de Triomphe, notice the 4th word from the bottom. It's Badajoz, where our battle happened. So check that out the next time you're in Paris. If you go to London, you may go to St. Paul's Cathedral and see where Wellington is interred. So he became just a real leader in Britain, and he's buried in St. Paul's Cathedral. And if you visit the western part of Spain, where it approaches Portugal, in this very rural, beautiful land, you might think of Napoleon and the Duke of Wellington.